literally cut in half. And he's got a bunch of like clothing and newspaper on top of him where they tried to burn him up, but the fire smoldered out. This is probably the most blood I've ever seen.
What was supposed to be an ordinary welfare check suddenly turned into a gruesome murder investigation when a 76-year-old man was found cut in half with multiple stab wounds, lacerations, and a broken knife tip lodged in his spine.
At that time, I'd been a detective over 25 years, close to 30 years, and I'd had a couple really bloody crime scenes, but this was bad. It seemed to me that there was a lot of anger. It wasn't a quick kill, so to speak. It was a prolonged battle.
The horrific murder sparked an immediate investigation, and to the detective's surprise, it led to multiple suspects.
I know a lot of things about this case. I got a lot of evidence on this case. Okay. And it's better to be a witness than a co-conspirator.
And what's a lawyer?
Okay.
The detectives were stunned when the 60-year-old grandmother revealed a horrifying truth.
I didn't get hurt. I said, where did blood come from? It came to the upper.
On June 10th, 2018, around 9:43 p.m. in Ann Arbor, Michigan, police received a 911 call from an elderly woman who expressed concern for her friend, Robert Sharp.
Hello, where's your emergency?
I'm at my friend's house. I checked in on him earlier today, did not find him around, and then the evening while I called his home phone, it said the voicemail wasn't set up, but it has been set up. But now there's no voicemail set up.
Do you want us to come into the house and check on it and like check the
Yeah.
the person? Okay, what's his name?
His name is Robert,
And how old is he?
76. So I live in the house, and as I'm driving past, I noticed that the paper was still on the front porch, and the door is a little bit open, so I'm not going in the house.
Cops rushed to the 200 block of Alpine Drive in Ann Arbor, but they had no idea about the horrors that awaited them inside the house. Arriving at the scene, they found the door unlocked and the house shrouded in complete darkness.
Oh. Robert!
Robert?
There was a fire in here. There was a fire downstairs.
Baker, can you send the FD? There's some type of fire in the basement here.
That's awesome. My camera's trying to blow up. I can't breathe up here. What could that be from?
They cautiously stepped inside the house with their flashlights cutting through the darkness. They found no sign of Robert. Instead, what they couldn't ignore was the permeating stench of smoke. Realizing there could be an active fire and the risk of an explosion, they decided not to proceed and immediately called the fire department. As the firefighters arrived and made their way inside, they stumbled upon something completely unexpected.
And then the basement window's right in front of you there, right there.
Alright. Where's that hand? I can see a hand, fellas.
Let me take a look.
Looking through the broken window, they spotted a hand on the floor. But that wasn't the end of it. What came next was truly horrifying.
Oh, holy shit. Yeah. Nikes. That's correct. You got a guy cut in half. Literally cut in half. And he's got a bunch of like clothing and newspaper on top of him where they tried to burn him up, but the fire smoldered out. This is probably the most blood I've ever seen.
By then, they'd identified the source of the smoke after discovering the partially burned body of Robert under a pile of scorched belongings in the basement. But as they continued searching the house and reached the kitchen, they were confronted with a terrifying and bloody scene.
I know everything's pretty dry.
Yeah. So that big mirror, that was on top of him?
A bunch of paper on them. A bunch of papers. Yeah. I don't know.
They found dried blood everywhere, with the most amount in the kitchen area and drag marks leading from the kitchen to the basement. It led them to believe that the murder had occurred several hours earlier. When they searched the parking area, they discovered a crucial clue.
A bunch of trash cans are all out. You walk down the parking area and look in all those trash cans, recyclables, to make sure there's not like some bloody rags or towels or out there. You know, I could see somebody leaving and dumping one of them trash cans on the way out of here with the car.
The note raised immediate suspicion. It stated that someone had borrowed Robert's wheelbarrow and would visit him later that night. Here, cops suspected that a confrontation might have turned violent, possibly involving a neighbor or someone with a grudge against him. But before questioning Robert's neighbors, they needed to interview the emergency caller to understand how she'd realized something was wrong.
So I came by earlier and his car wasn't here and I hadn't heard from him. So I thought, well, I'll give a call to the house. And I called to the house and it says the voicemail's not set up. I said, well, let me drive by. And so I came by tonight. And when I left, I started down the road and I said, well, what's that on the porch? Well, I come back around and it was his New York Times and a priority mail package. Well,
Okay.
his New York Times is like this coffee. And the door is cracked. I mean, the door is open about that much.
She explained in detail what had prompted her to make the emergency call, but they still couldn't eliminate her as a potential suspect. So, to gauge her reaction, they shared the gruesome details of Robert's death.
There's somebody in there. We don't know if it's him. So just when was the last time you talked to him?
I talked to him Thursday.
Okay.
They found her truly distressed and emotional over her friend's death. She also agreed to willingly cooperate with the investigation, offering important details about Robert.
He doesn't have any family here. He doesn't have a whole lot of friends. He's a retired professor, you know, and so I just would come and, you know, he was trying to get the house organized and cleaned up because his wife just passed away.
How long ago did she pass away?
She passed away on April 20th, I believe. So Bob and Maria was his wife,
Mm-hmm.
and I've known them for 25 years.
Okay.
Well, he would go to Wendy's around noonish every day.
Mm-hmm.
And he would take his laptop and, you know, he'd always put it in the trunk and he had his bag and he took extra stuff. They, you know, a couple people knew him really well at Wendy's and they would get his order.
Cops got to know that Robert and his wife used to visit a Wendy's outlet daily. But since his wife Maria's death in April 2018, he had been going there alone. At this point, the officers had no idea just how pivotal Robert's connection to the Wendy's would prove to be in the next phase of their investigation. In the meantime, they were focused on unraveling the mystery of the suspicious note. They questioned several neighbors, but found no clues regarding its origin. They also learned that Robert's only son, David, lived with his wife and children in New York. What struck them as odd was that it was Robert's friend who had contacted them out of concern, not his son. So they decided to reach out to David for more details. Being informed, David was devastated by his father's death, having lost his mother just months earlier. However, David and his wife Christine provided them with important details about Robert's personal life and daily routines.
My father learned at home how important education was and actually skipped a few grades and went to MIT at 15.
He never stopped learning. Like, his thing was to always learn.
My mom and dad met because they were set up by my dad's crazy aunt, Aunt Helen. My dad would read to my mom almost every night. They would just go up to their room and he would read to her. There was a Wendy's near my parents' condo that they loved to go to all the time. So after my mom died, my dad continued to go there for a while because it was just a part of their routine. It was a link to my mom.
Most notably, like Robert's friend, David also revealed that he used to take his lunch regularly at the Wendy's. But he never heard his father complain about the Wendy's outlet or mention any trouble with it. He couldn't even think of anyone who might want to harm his father. However, by this point, the detectives considered Wendy's connection even more significant to the investigation. So they visited the Wendy's outlet, but were unable to find any useful leads. The staff there remembered Robert as a kind and gentle man, but that was the extent of what they could offer into the investigation. However, the detectives would soon uncover the most pivotal clue that Robert himself had left behind before his death, pointing directly to his killer.
We found that on June 6th, just 5 days before he was murdered, Robert had actually called 911 to report that his home had been broken into. We couldn't help wondering, is this related to his homicide? Did the person who broke into Robert's house have something to do with his murder?
They immediately reviewed the 911 call.
Boston, Interrogation 11.
Hello, I'd like to report a crime, a break-in.
Okay. Is it happening now or did it?
No, it happened this afternoon.
Okay. Just found it?
Yes, I just got home. I left this afternoon about 1:30, and then by the time I got home, I noticed that one of my drawers in which I keep keys and things had been rummaged through.
Did you find any obvious points of entry?
Yes, my back door.
How did it in?
Well, I thought that my back door was locked, but when I got there and tried it, it was not locked.
If you don't know for sure that nobody's still inside, I'm going to ask you to wait outside.
Okay, I'll do that, yes.
They learned that on June 6th, after the emergency call, officers had arrived at Robert's house and recorded the entire investigation on their body cams. Detectives quickly reviewed the footage, hoping to uncover any lead, as they suspected robbery might have been the motive behind the murder.
And when you came up, you noticed the door was not locked. You went inside, and then what did you notice? You can go ahead and show me.
It was open, and so then right inside that cupboard, I have a drawer where I normally put my car keys, I put my bill phones and that kind of thing in. I went inside the drawer where I do that, and it had obviously been rummaged through. Everything was in a different position and messed around.
Can you show me where that drawer is at?
Yeah. This is where my keys would hang.
Okay.
They're gone.
Okay.
I had one of those little blue sticks, and that I don't see.
And what is that?
Oh, it's to control your internet with a remote like this that operates a Roku unit. And basically, the Roku is gone. The Roku is gone.
I don't know what a Roku unit is.
Okay, a Roku unit is something where you get all of your television from the internet. You don't have to buy cable. They stole the Roku unit.
In the footage, Robert was seen explaining that his house had been ransacked and several items were missing.
I suppose we have little here.
DVD
This
player.
is a DVD thing, and this is a DVD player. They're here. Now, another thing that was strange is in here, I shouldn't make these notes, but I did. Credit cards, all kinds of things in there. None of it's missing as far as I can tell. It's all still there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's strange.
But there was something off about the robbery that didn't quite add up.
He seemed surprised about some of the things that were still present. His car keys are stolen, but his car is still there. There's credit card information on the open table, and that's still there.
Unfortunately, officers were unable to identify any suspects in that home invasion case. Meanwhile, the detectives received a tip that officers had finally tracked down the neighbor who had left the handwritten note in Robert's house. She explained that she genuinely borrowed a wheelbarrow from Robert a few days earlier and had just intended to return it, but hadn't seen him recently. So she left the note in an attempt to reach him. With the note mystery being solved, detectives ruled her out as a suspect. Next, they received Robert's autopsy report, which revealed that he had died from 28 sharp force wounds, including both slashes and stabs, including a fatal carotid artery severance causing deep hemorrhage. The broken knife tip still lodged in his spine indicated exceptional force, and there was evidence of post-mortem ignition as well. All of this pointed to a perpetrator fueled by rage who likely knew Robert personally. However, as the investigation unfolded, they soon got to know about an individual recently arrested for a similar home invasion in the area, and he was immediately brought in for questioning.
That's for murder of a university professor, okay? Old retired guy, chemistry guy, okay? Anything that you can think of?
This is all new to me, sir. So no, it's not really.
I know a lot of things about this case. I got a lot of evidence on this case.
Okay.
And it's better to be a witness than a co-conspirator or, okay?
Yes, sir.
So I just want to make that absolutely clear.
I don't know what's going on. You can open that phone, do what you want to do.
Nope, I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
That's all going to go a long way.
Okay, that's like I said. I'm just came home to go tell you. I'm not trying to get.
You don't want to go back.
Yeah, nothing.
He shared detailed information to prove that he was not involved in the case. But his next claim about an individual on the street desperately trying to sell a Mac computer would soon plunge the investigation into a whirlwind of doubt.
He wanted to buy a phone for me, yeah. And then he tried to offer me a Mac computer. Like, this was like around that time he asked to send me a Mac computer. I'm like, no, I don't want no computer. I don't know what that.
Trying to sell you one?
Yeah, trying to say, like, you know, but you interested in buying a Mac computer? I'm like, nah, bro, I'm straight. I don't know what you involved in, but I'm straight on the Mac computer.
Did he say anything about where he got it?
No, yeah, that's what I asked him, like, where'd you get it from?
You tried to sell you anything else besides the Mac computer?
That was it. Like I said, he walked around with a big ass book bag on arm. So I don't know what's that back.
You ever discussed with you burning anything?
No, sir.
Throwing anything away?
No, sir.
You ever mentioned to you doing home invasion?
No, sir.
You ever seen him with a knife?
No, sir.
Unfortunately, after the interrogation, they couldn't link him further to the murder and eliminated him as a suspect. However, they suspected the person he'd mentioned might be involved in the robbery, which could explain his rush to sell the laptop before getting caught. But here, the problem was that no one knew anything about him. He could only be traced if any surveillance camera in the area where he was spotted selling the laptop had captured him. But before they could look into this angle, they uncovered a key lead in another conversation with David. He mentioned that in May 2018, while Robert was at Wendy's, he went to the bathroom and found his Apple laptop missing when he returned. Many employees who knew Robert from his regular lunch visits tried to assist him in locating the missing laptop, but it was never found. Detectives suspected that one of the restaurant staff members might have been involved, as they were the only ones aware of where Robert typically sat was a spot not covered by the CCTV cameras. When detectives reviewed the backgrounds of all the staff working that day, they quickly identified a promising suspect.
Of course, we went to Wendy's and we pulled video of Sharp at the Wendy's on the last day we knew he was there. And he's easy enough to recognize because he's a tall, slender, elderly gentleman. And we'd watch the video of him interacting and nothing seems suspicious. Staff looks normal with him. We go through the employee list and we just do a basic background on each employee. We found that there was an individual, Isom Hamilton, who was on parole at the time. Well, we found that he was on parole for a home invasion case. So he goes to the top of the heap. He goes a primary suspect at that point.
It was very surprising that 29-year-old Isom Hamilton, who had been out on parole since November 2017 after serving 4 years for assaulting a police officer, possessing a dangerous weapon, and committing arson, was working there as a staff member, and no one ever suspected him of stealing the laptop. He had an extensive criminal history with 6 felony convictions and 16 misdemeanors on his record. With this revelation, Hamilton became a focus of the investigation, and the detectives decided to look into his activities on the day of the murder. This was when the surveillance footage from a Speedway gas station at the intersection of Carpenter Road and Packard Street uncovered a significant lead.
It was closer to 2 o'clock in the morning, and we see him come in with 2 backpacks. It appears to be stains on his clothing, specifically his pants. And he opens the backpack at one point to reach into it, and you can see Roku devices, which were missing from the homicide scene. You can see them actually sitting on top of that backpack.
Hamilton's pants showed dark brown stains, which detectives believed to be blood, hastily wiped off after killing Robert. With the evidence pointing in the right direction, they were sure they were close to apprehending the perpetrator. Authorities searched for Hamilton, but found no trace. So, hoping for a lead, they next reached out to Hamilton's grandmother, with whom he was living at the time. The details she provided during the interrogation helped them connect the dots and fill in the missing links, leading them directly to the possible murderer.
Your grandson, Isom, has been staying with you since about when you told me that.
about the in February? Okay. Ted, so you started seeing some things that weren't happening. Tell me about that again. What was going on?
When he was still working, some of the items I thought, I said, well, maybe he might have bought them computer, but I wasn't sure. And I know those apples are quite expensive, and I know he wasn't making enough money to buy an apple.
So you saw him with an Apple computer? Yeah. He's probably not making enough money.
Oh, no. Not at that. No.
And so you ask him about it, and he tells you what?
Well, he told me a guy had offered to sell it for him. He wanted to sell it for him.
So that didn't make sense either, really, then, right? Okay. What other kind of things were you seeing that caught your attention? A telephone? What kind of? Do you have any idea what kind of telephone? Okay. It was an Apple phone?
Yeah.
Were you suspicious of the Apple phone too, though, or? And what did he tell you about the one he's trying to give you?
Hey, Grandma, I bought all of it. I bought this with my money. I bought them, and I'm just keeping it up for the sell them. I know, you know.
So he bought them, but he told you he was going to sell them. But that doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, it doesn't. So what I did, I don't know what you're doing. You take this back, you didn't pay for it, take it back, and get all that other stuff out of my house. And I said, any stolen goods, I don't want any stuff in my house.
Yeah. And how about items like for the TV? We talked about this Roku stuff.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
And it was 3 boxes.
So you saw 3 Roku boxes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Stole for me once. You got caught working in somebody's house.
You stole from YouTube?
Yes.
She revealed that Hamilton's income wasn't enough to afford expensive items like an Apple computer and phone, but he'd recently acquired them. While she had no idea how Hamilton had obtained these items, detectives were now certain of their origin. So they quickly moved on to asking about the night of the murder.
As far as the regular phones go, was there a time that you saw him come home and he had some stain or some kind of stuff on his pants that caught your attention?
Yeah, that one time he came home with some blue sheets. Well, it was that late at night and he came in. It looked like this kind of rough stuff, and I'm like, what happened to you? I hadn't looked up with somebody. I didn't get hurt. I said, where did blood come from? It came to the other person. You know, the other day, I saw a spice in his bag. Why your bag is big? But it did look like he was like, that the blue jeans he was wearing, they were bloody.
You were bloody? Yeah. Where did you see the blood on the blue jeans? Down in there, okay. Mostly on like from the knee down, would you say? Like below the knee?
Yeah. I'd say that might have been there.
Okay. Blood on the blue jeans was maybe a couple weeks ago?
I can't say for sure, but it wasn't this week.
You can't say exactly, but you think maybe 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
So he came in, you said it was late at night. What time, what do you call late at night? Or do you have any recollection of what time it was?
It's like about 1 or when he was working 1 or 2 o'clock. And sometime when he wasn't working, he would try to come in early like
Yeah. So what time on that day do you think he was? Any idea?
That was, I think last night was I'm not sure, but I don't think it might be.
Around past 12 o'clock, maybe? We're talking 12 o'clock midnight, right?
Yeah.
Somewhere around there past midnight?
Yeah.
She asserted that she'd seen Hamilton one midnight with his pants covered in blood below the knee, just as it had appeared in the previous CCTV footage. This led them to quickly obtain a search warrant for his grandmother's apartment in Ypsilanti, where they eventually discovered key evidence they were desperately searching for.
In the Speedway video, Lysom is wearing a specific T-shirt, a specific pair of pants. We did the search warrant at his grandma's house, and we were able to find a pair of pants that had stains on it. He had a backpack with him. He had 2 stolen computers with him. We just matched the serial numbers up. Both of them were Robert Sharp's.
Inside the home, they discovered bloodstained jeans and Robert's items that had been reported missing. With sufficient evidence against him, he was arrested on June 27, 2018, and taken to the police station for interrogation, where his responses were unusually strange.
So, we tracked down a couple people and talked to a couple people, and we executed a search warrant over at your grandma's place, and we got some stuff. So we need kind of to talk to you about that stuff if you want to know what's going on. I can't hear you, man. What? I'm sorry, what? One more time. You were kind of mumbling there. I thought I heard what you said, but if you want to be real clear about it.
And what's the lawyer?
Okay. You don't want to talk to me now? You want to talk to the lawyer? That's fine. And we got some stuff.
Got more. We can't talk to you now unless you want to talk to us first.
So, come on out. Put you back in your cell.
During the interrogation, he kept his head down in silence, refusing to answer any questions without first consulting a lawyer, as if he was plotting his next move. However, by piecing together all the evidence, they were able to reconstruct a clear picture of the tragic incident. Robert, a regular at Wendy's, was well known to Hamilton, who often had conversations with him and learned that he was a wealthy person. From that point, Hamilton targeted Robert, tracking his daily activities and occasionally visiting his house. From those visits, Hamilton became well aware of the valuables in Robert's house. He then planned and carried out 2 separate robberies. After the death of Robert's wife, he became an easy prey for Hamilton. Driven by greed, Hamilton entered the house on June 10th, thinking Robert would be gone, but he was startled to find him there. Before Robert could react, he swiftly grabbed a knife from the butcher's block and fatally stabbed him to death on the kitchen floor. He then dragged the body to the basement to destroy the evidence by setting fire on it, an effort that ultimately failed. However, it was all just a theory. By that point, the detectives also realized that Hamilton would never confess to his crime, so they needed stronger evidence to charge him with murder because the evidence they had collected could only link him to the burglary and theft and not the killing. So they relied on the test results from the crime scene DNA and bloodstained genes, believing these would directly link Hamilton to the murder. But when the results came in, they were left stunned. Neither the DNA nor the fingerprints found at the crime scene matched Hamilton. Additionally, the red stains on his jeans tested negative for Robert's blood. With no forensic evidence linking Hamilton to the murder, detectives shifted their focus to circumstantial evidence. A friend of Hamilton came forward, stating that on the evening of June 10th, she'd seen Hamilton walking towards Ann Arbor. After a short conversation, they went their separate ways, and a few days later, he offered her a Roku streaming device, but she declined. Since Robert's credit card had been weirdly found near his feet at the crime scene, detectives reviewed his financial records for any transactions made after his murder.
Lo and behold, there's a couple failed transactions to a Square account at about 12:30 the night of the murder. Those went to the crime lab and they came back as an attempted transaction to ISOM. We also found out through cell phone records that he was pinging off the tower next to Robert Sharp's residence, stationary, for 2 hours.
They discovered that Hamilton owned 2 cell phones and used one to create a Square account, attempting to transfer money from Robert's credit card to his own account on the other phone just after the murder. However, the transaction failed because Hamilton had tried to use a credit card instead of a debit card. FBI special agents also analyzed data from those 2 cell phones and found that Hamilton was located within 80 meters of Robert's home during the incident and had later gone to his grandmother's house in Ypsilanti. They also discovered that Robert had purchased a new laptop to replace the one that had gone missing at Wendy's and used it to video chat with his son in New York on the evening of the murder. The laptop was missing from the crime scene, but was later seen on surveillance footage the morning after the murder with Hamilton at the Apple store in Briarwood Mall, where he went to erase the hard drive. Based on compelling circumstantial evidence, he was finally charged with several offenses, including first-degree murder, arson, home invasion, and mutilation of a dead body. By this point, the motive behind the killing was very clear to the detectives.
Isom Hamilton broke into the home on June 6th and then broke back in hopes to get additional items of value when the homicide happened. Isom Hamilton showed no remorse and no emotion. To me, it was very sad.
However, they dug deeper into his twisted psychology to understand what had driven him to take the life of an innocent person over something as trivial as theft. They found that in 2012, Hamilton was convicted for a similar home invasion targeting a university's professor in Ypsilanti. When the professor confronted Hamilton as he was leaving with stolen items, Hamilton threatened to shoot him if he didn't move. The professor stepped aside, narrowly avoiding being killed. The police later found Hamilton hiding under a bush nearby. After analyzing this home invasion, investigators discovered that Hamilton had a method for committing such crimes. He'd bring gloves, break into homes when the residents were away, steal as many electronics as possible, and leave with them in a bag. A pair of gloves was found in Hamilton's bag during his 2012 arrest. This also explained why no fingerprints or DNA of Hamilton were found in Robert's house. Hamilton also had no history of mental illness or substance abuse, which indicated that his actions were motivated entirely by greed. With overwhelming evidence against him, he had no way to evade the punishment. However, he maintained his innocence and even protested his arrest.
So the detectives already told me they went through the scene. None of my prints, none of my DNA was there, and they already took my DNA.
I'm not in a position to argue the case.
So why am I being incarcerated falsely?
During the 4-day trial, the defense attorneys contended that there was insufficient physical evidence to conclusively link Hamilton to the murder. Hamilton showed no remorse and instead vigorously denied the murder allegations.
To the family, I didn't kill nobody. All this is circumstantial. Me being in possession of electronics that I bought off somebody else is just that. All elements were not met at all. I've been prosecuted and convicted solely on the premise of my past, subjective opinions, and mere speculation. This case was normally and prematurely bound over without any definitive evidence, lab results, or essential elements being met or presented. I was never placed at the crime scene. There was never any material witness stating I was in the area neighborhood, which I would have been easily recognized and stood out due to the fact that the area is predominantly white people or white older people. There's no black in that area of Ann Arbor. I would easily been stood out, especially walking down the street as I went over the maps that they've prepared. It's not no easy way to get to his house. It's a long way. Somebody would have seen me. Night, day, either way. There are multiple cameras at the golf course on Eisenhower, along with cameras in the traffic lights and on people's houses, as was in the reports when the neighborhood was canvassed by William Stanford and Detective Daniel Iverson, along with other people. The circumstantial evidence of me being in possession of stolen property after the fact is just that, possession without any concrete evidence that placed me at the crime scene, since I was biasedly found guilty on circumstantial evidence alone. All the elements were not met, and the prosecutor, John Paul Vella, wildly threw opinions and speculation around his facts, and he blatantly lied about the physical evidence, such as the allegedly bloody clothes that were recovered a few days after I was arrested. But at trial, the prosecutor, John Paul Vella, stated that the clothes were never recovered after statements were given to the news stations that bloody clothing was recovered before they even sent it to the MSP lab. Once they were sent to the lab, everything came back negative for blood, and the results for all biological and physical evidence was never presented at trial. This was all done with malicious intent because everyone's mindset is that if they stated on the news, it's true. Even after they came back and found the results that no blood or nothing was ever found on any clothes taken from my residence, they didn't put that on the news. They didn't correct that or nothing. But yet, that was in the public's or the community's eye. That's why I went with the bench trial. Because the jury doesn't have to go by law. They can go by opinion, bias, or compassion. But you were supposed to make sure that justice was served. All elements were met. No, all elements were not met. I was never placed at the crime scene.
The forensic expert who had performed Robert's autopsy also testified in court.
There's some parts of them that have a small rim of red. In terms of the body maybe responding a little bit to it. And so I would, in my opinion, he died the fire would have been started almost very quickly after death or in the process of dying.
Isom Hamilton was convicted after 30 witnesses testified and more than 300 pieces of evidence were presented. On June 28, 2019, Washtenaw County trial judge Darlene O'Brien, considering the circumstantial evidence overwhelming, found Hamilton guilty of Robert's murder.
You're selfish, violent, and senseless acts have brought anguish, fear, and suffering to many. Nothing can bring back the life that's been lost, but you have proven yourself to be the highest danger to society, and you cannot be trusted with freedom again.
Evaluating the brutality of the crime, he was sentenced to life in prison without any possibility of parole.
It was a huge relief for me, a huge relief for the family. I felt like I could finally bring the family some closure.
Finally, justice was served for Robert's loved ones, but the tragic loss remained difficult for them to accept.
Besides just the extreme, profound sadness, I had, just persistent nightmares about the murder, or about being able to stop the murder, or about having somebody in our house about to take my family. That actually was quite difficult.
It was such a hard time. That whole period was like, it was like living a nightmare, a dream, and floating on a cloud at the same time. You just don't know what you're doing or who you are. It was a tough situation. It's also tough because our kids went, and it's tough to explain to them how something like this could happen.
David continued to regret not being with his father to protect him that day.
I'll never know if he was, calling out for me in his last moments. That's entirely unknowable, whether he was thinking about me in his last moments, or whether if I'd been there, could I have helped him? I should have been there to protect him.
Now, they were left only with his cherished memories forever alive in their hearts.
My father was a funny, empathetic man who you had to get to know. And then once you knew him, all of those wonderful traits came out. He loved people. He loved art. He loved culture. He was just a joy to be around.
Following the tragic incident, Wendy's also paid tribute to Robert.
They had been going to this Wendy's for at least 16 years. The employees of Wendy's, along with the Wendy's franchise, have put up plaques in honor of my mother-in-law and father-in-law in both the restaurant and in the outdoor bench where they would eat. If there's anything, it's just you wish you could just have a little bit more time.
Before we conclude, we extend our heartfelt condolences to Robert Sharp and his loved ones. What are your thoughts on this case? Was Hamilton only involved in the robbery and not the murder? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more such episodes.